my OBS started freaking out, and I didn't want to like accidentally have the game flashing at people. Anyways, this is a really famous game. I'll just restate stuff for YouTube because I just lost the first few minutes, but it's okay. This game is a really famous game, and I think a lot of other commentaries have been done on it, but whenever people ask me how to use thickness or influence, I always think of this game. So yeah, let's get into it. Huang Longxi is white. So this game took place really long time ago. I don't know if I have the info on it. Nope. But basically, it's a really famous game from old China. My guess would be 1200s, but I can't really say for sure. Huang Longxi is a very strong player, not too known in the West, because most of the West's Go information actually came from Japan until the last few years when Korea started producing more information. But we still even see, even in old China, so in old classical Chinese games, they always start with this cross fuseki unless it's a handicap game. It's very rare to see other positions unless there's a handicap. And white approaches. We see even then that this low approach is the most common. Their openings are very different though. There is some reasoning behind them, but I won't go too much into it now since that's not the focus of this discussion. Anyway, so black approaches, and white plays this kind of splitting move. This was fairly common in old Chinese games. Part of the reason for this is that old Chinese games had what's called a group tax. So you would lose points for every group you made. So one strategy was to try to cut your opponent's groups. It's still a good idea to cut your opponent's groups even without the group tax. So then we see black plays a similar move. White jumps, and there's a reason this game is something I'm talking about influence. So this jump is fairly unusual. Probably these days we'd see an extension or a counter pincer. But white has a plan. He wants to build some influence in the center, and he's going to use that. Black plays a large knight's move. This kind of extension was really the only extension you saw back then. There were, I don't know any cases, but I imagine there were probably some cases where other corner extensions were made. But I think this was by far the most common corner extension. And we kind of get an interesting shape with these two jumps in this stone. I don't think you'd ever be able to replicate this game, or this opening even, these days, because your opponents won't play this way, but the principles and ideas, once we get to them, will be applicable. So white presses here, and white's strategy is after black blocks to push, and you can see white is starting to build a very loose wall. Black defends the corner. If black doesn't defend, and for instance counter approaches, I don't think they'd play this pattern either. I've never seen it in an old Chinese game, but there is weaknesses here with this Hana that after white cuts, it's very difficult for black to manage. Black can also play here, but white will just descend, and white is still in trouble. White could probably push first too. So that's why we see black play this descent to secure the corner and fix this weakness. And then white plays a very interesting capping move. We can see that white's whole plan so far is just to build a kind of giant wall along the right hand side. Or at least white is very focused on building influence in the center. There's not really much else that white is kind of committing to. So it's pretty nice. It's pretty interesting. Normally, we wouldn't see this kind of strategy. Today, and even by games of that time, this kind of play is fairly unusual. Black makes a base. This is pretty common. Black could go on the corner. I'm kind of using modern joseki to illustrate a point, but if black goes in the corner, then I guess here. White can gain some good points in the center, and you never know how big this will develop. It's pretty big. So black plays a extension, and this extension is also aiming at this, this stone here. There's links underneath, there's a Hana here. It exploits a weakness, or aims at a weakness, but white is still intent on building this wall, forcing here. Black doesn't want to just back off, otherwise white can complete the huge wall, and this group is not completely solid yet. So black resists trying to get into the center. This also opens up moves like the attachment up here. White is going to fight, right? Black didn't defend the stone, so white's going to try to cut it off. And the best way to use your influence or thickness is to try to attack stones. So by splitting these two groups, or these two groups of stones, white can effectively use the bottom kind of loose influence that he has to attack both. Black makes shape. After this exchange, black can connect up over here. I think it's pretty obvious, right? Black can play here to link up, in case it wasn't obvious, but just in case. Yep. So black Hanes, this is the shape point. These four stones are pretty short on liberties. Part of that is because white has an empty triangle, and so this becomes a critical point. White has to cut. If white doesn't cut and say backs off, then black's going to get good shape in the center. All the thinness that white has down here is exposed, and black still has this descent in combination with a 3-3 point in the corner. So it's a very good result for black if white doesn't cut to fight. And again, fighting is important. Fighting is how you use your influence in your surrounding stones. Of course, you need very good reading to use your fighting to fight, but you could also just even consider in the first place. You have to consider, do I have strength? Do I have friendly stones that can help me? Black extends, otherwise white captures that stone. Black can Atari first, but it doesn't really change anything. White pushes, and black Hanes. I think it's more typical to see this extension. Even if white protects this cut, black can connect under, and if white gets aggressive, there's still a lot of weaknesses here with this attachment or this move. Not to mention the corner, you also have this kind of thing. If white descends, then black can kill the group. So maybe this Hane is a little bit too aggressive. It feels a little bit like an overplay to me. I couldn't say for sure. I'm not that at their strength, but it feels like an overplay. White cuts. This is the natural move. In order to keep these stones short on liberties, almost dead, it opens up a lot of options for white. So cutting is the natural move. This empty triangle is actually a very good move. Otherwise, there's no real other way to save these stones without damaging the surrounding positions. And by surrounding positions, I mean the other two black groups. You could consider if you Atari and extend, then black's also come back here or here. But now the stone here can be caught in a ladder, and and white is stronger. The M12, N12 stones are stronger, so I could also consider playing a move like this to capture these stones. Although it's still a little iffy, but that would be the idea. So that's why black just plays the empty triangle to get out. White extends anyway, right? White has to strengthen this area, and black Ataris gets these free forcing moves before coming back to defend and capturing the R9 stone. This feels almost like a good success for black. Black got a lot of points on the side, but white also got a lot of influence in the center and points at the top if white spends a move to capture these stones. However, white's initial plan wasn't to take the top, and the top still has a lot of weaknesses like this attachment and this 3-3 point, the clamp here. These stones still have a lot of agility, so white can't be satisfied just by taking the top. And that's why we see this peep to fix the shape before this turn. And so white is still trying to build center influence and utilize these stones on the right. Black jumps. This is natural. And white plays a very nice knight's move. If black doesn't jump, then white can play a nice move here to seal off the side. But in this case, this nice move also seals off this black group from the rest of the board. So you have to weigh how much is white's influence worth against these points that black got. When you're completely sealed, your stones no longer have an impact on the rest of the game, which is a really big benefit for white. On the other hand, white has no points yet, but white has a lot of development potential, right? White seems to have a lot of control over the rest of the board, where black can try to negate the influence. He has a very nicely placed stone at J3, but he doesn't have room to make a lot of points. He can only really develop from the upper left, and that's still kind of limited by the influence. We see black come back to exploit the Aji. White went down, so black is going up. That's the natural flow, right? Since white tried to take influence on the bottom side, it makes sense for black to take advantage of the weaknesses left up here. White descends is too good for black if white just backs off somehow. There's not a really good way to fix the shape, right? If you play this move, you're in really bad shape. There's this Hana here, and if you play another move, then this is Atari. So white has to split black. Black plays a very nice cut to exploit the shortage of liberties here and the thinness in white's shape. White extends. White can't really pick a fight. If white cuts, then this cut is threatening both the stone here and the cut here, and there's not really a good way. Black can just extend, but eventually white runs out of options to save those stones, right? If white goes here, then black cuts, and white only has 2 liberties left, and all the black groups have more than 2 liberties. So that's why we see white just extend, giving up the corner. So far white has basically given up the right side and is about to give up the corner for this big amount of center control, the center wall. White just sacrifices the corner. This nice move is very nice because it aims at some Aji like this Hane or the slide later. But so now we see white has completed this very kind of loose but very strong center wall. It's strong because white has an eye here, and these 3 stones are basically dead. So white has a very strong wall. Black has corner points. I think he has a defend. Yeah. So black defends a corner. Black has corner points and side points, but white just has a wall. So the game, and this is why it comes to mind every time someone tells me, oh, how do you use, or asks me how do you use influence, I think of, oh, just look at this game where white commits completely to influence and black takes points. And again, it's a really famous game, it's nothing special, or I guess it is special because it's a famous game. But it's still good to go over. So you could probably guess black's next move. Black, the most open side is on the left, but black has a weak stone on the bottom. Those are really the only 2 choices. It's white's turn. White has to harass the bottom stone. If white, for example, takes a big point, if black gets a settle down here, it's very difficult to use the center influence. Maybe black even jumps, right? It's very difficult to gain enough benefit from the influence to compensate for the big corner and this corner / side that white gave up. You could feel like most of the influence is going to waste. So that's why you have to use influence to attack. So even if the left side is technically bigger, white needs to put pressure on black to utilize the influence he's invested in effectively. So black extends. This is, almost anyone I feel will play this move. There's not, the other choice you have is to run out, but aside from being a very nice point, black now doesn't have a base. It's kind of vulnerable, right? You still don't have eyes, you have to fix the shape maybe. Still running, then white can still move to the left side, but now white profited at the bottom too. And it's a much better game for white. So black defends. White defends this push and cut, this Aji. It also starts to activate these stones that white sacrificed or kind of threw as forcing moves against black. Black takes the top side. This is a little strange to me. It makes sense. The top is very big. If white gets an approach move at f17, it utilizes this influence very well, but personally, well, I wouldn't play a19. But personally, I thought that maybe black would take the left-hand side because the left half of the board, if you look at it after, aside from being a very strange enclosure, it's almost symmetric. So now when white takes the left-hand side, if white takes the left-hand side, it's like getting the center point of a symmetric position, which is pretty nice. But again, maybe it's not enough. And still, white has a lot of influence, so white wants to use it. And you don't have to play the big points immediately. To use your influence, you can just attack right away. Otherwise, you might miss opportunities, and the most important thing is to capitalize on the opportunities you presented. So even though black has a 2-space extension, this is fairly weak. And we can notice that white's playing this really aggressive attachment instead of, say, a looser cap. This cap would be a more not necessarily difficult move for black to answer, but it does give black more options, like this attachment, or even running through later this kind of tesuji for escaping. So white plays a really forceful J4 move. The other idea behind this is white is trying to also get sent. White wants to enclose the center, block black off, but white still needs to get sent to move to the left-hand side. Otherwise, the influence becomes less effective. So this kind of attachment is a very forceful way of playing. Black Hanas, this not a lot of other moves. You could play a extension, but it feels like you've been forced, and now maybe white takes the left-hand side, but it's a lot more difficult for you to get into the center, right? Whoops. Right, well, it's kind of blocked off. So black Hanas, white extends, of course, still keeping in mind trying to enclose the center or block it off. Black fixes the shape, and black needs to make life, right? If black doesn't play here, there's some really dangerous moves that white can play against this shape. If I recall correctly, things like J2 and L2 threaten the eye space that black has. So those are points that black has to keep in mind, and that's why white, he plays this attachment. Now, the important thing is keeping in mind with what we said before, white has built a lot of influence, but not a lot of points, maybe a little bit here, but it's still open. When you are trying to attack or play aggressively, one of the most important things you want to do is not help your opponent. You want to make your opponent, if they're going to play a defensive move, you want it to be a purely defensive move, not a move that reacts to what you're doing. So if you have that in mind, white's next move makes a lot of sense. White's just going to extend. A lot of weaker players will hane instead. For instance, maybe at P2, but after black backs off, white has to spend a move to protect the cutting point at P3. The backing off move is a move black wanted to play anyway. It helps him defend his shape, and then he might move to the left-hand side, and now white's down a move. If you hane it on the inside, even though you can take the stone, this gives black this forcing move, even this move kind of, you can't cut. You might have some tesuji to cut, but that doesn't actually work. But you still give black a lot of free moves that you otherwise wouldn't want to give. So that's why this kind of extension is useful and important. Black pushes, otherwise white will hane at N2, having defended the weakness by just extending the P3. Black pushes, and you can imagine white's move is very simple. You could again think, oh, white should hane, don't let black connect, and if black cuts this, you can take the stone, so black will get separated, you could kill the group. Black's only move is to pull back, but again, this is a move black wants to play anyway, and white will have to take gote in order to come back and protect the Q2 stone. So the new move is very obvious. White extends again. And now black is pretty safe, so I think he tenukis, and takes his point on the left. So now black managed to settle his bottom group in sente, and black has a lot of points on the right and in the upper corner, and a framework in the upper left. All white has is this half-board influence. How is white going to use that? Well, you can already think white already did profit a little bit from this influence, right? By attacking the bottom group, white started settling some things on the bottom left, and he ran and destroyed territory in the bottom right. Of course, that's not enough, but it's a start, and that's what white is aiming at, or white is accomplished so far. So you might consider, well, I want to build a framework with my influence. I want to push black. You might think black plays here, but black will probably jump. But let's say black backs off for whatever reason, and I want to like build a framework, right? But can white really gain enough points here to to compensate for the losses on the upper corner, right, bottom, and this framework? Probably not. And so if you want to use your influence effectively, you have to aggressively attack your opponent's stones, and the beginning of an attack is to separate. Really? That wasn't the move? Oh. Okay. Well, white does come in play here. I forgot about these exchanges. You want to aggressively attack your opponent. Actually, I forgot. From the benefit in the bottom right, since white has started to chip away into black's corner, white can play these exchanges that help white solidify the center. That's kind of embarrassing. Oh well. So black cuts, white defends the stone, and now black has to capture these, otherwise black is in danger. So black Atari is first, then comes back. This is a nice Tetsuji for shortening white's liberties. Right after this, it's not an empty triangle, it's a full triangle, but it's still S9 takes away more liberties than would otherwise be possible. And this is kind of all forced. White gets this very nice Atari, and black has to take these stones, otherwise black dies, right? Take, connect, Atari. And we can see from these exchanges, they're Sente exchanges, white gained a lot of points. The fact that black has to capture these stones means that black is filling in his own territory anyway. These are very good sacrifices. Also, white got to fortify an eye here and get these stones for free to solidify the position. So these are really good exchanges for white. And then after this, I believe, yeah, white does come back. To use his thickness, he needs to attack and separate black's position. So by separating this stone, this gives white another opportunity to use his influence. Black's next move is obvious. It's a 2-space extension. Black wants to settle himself. And here, the next move is kind of difficult. White, in order to use the influence, can't spend time defending c12. White has to keep the pressure on black. So you might think, okay, I want to take away the base from black's group. But this move isn't so dangerous. Black just jumps. Now c12 is almost under attack. White needs to play something a bit stronger or more forceful, something that black can't play elsewhere. White could have t12. t12 when? If black doesn't answer this, white can t12. If black plays here, white will Atari, connect t12. And the black stones are on Atari, so they're dead. Is that what you meant? I know there's going to be a little bit of Twitch lag, so I can't reply right away. But if you could tell me at what point further back, even further back. Oh, here? Or when? Can you give me a move number? This is move 74. White could t12. t12. So after black plays here, white plays t12. Black will just take the 2 stones. So further back. Further back, I don't think there's anything, because if white plays, black will just cut and take this stone and make it mi. With connecting. One move back from n6. So instead of n6, do you think if white plays t12 now, black will take these stones, right? This is Atari. The R12 stones are in Atari, so you can't take these quite yet, because if you Atari, then you're moved short in the race. It looks locally like a good shape, right? Because black can't play t10, but unfortunately these stones are short of liberties. Yeah. Good try though. It was really close. Again, these guys, their reading is really, really sharp. They're all one move away from dying, so yeah. Okay, so anyway, white plays here, and I was saying before, c5 is too slack a move. It doesn't apply enough pressure. Even though it does apply some pressure to black, so black will respond, it feels like c12 is now under attack, and it doesn't apply enough pressure to the black group. Of course, you could think, oh, well, if c12 is under attack, I want to apply pressure from the other way, but black's very happy to settle in white's area. Black has the right side, the bottom, the corner, this upper side, and now this side. It seems like, you know, if white responds, then black's happy to go into the center, and if white takes the center, black's happy to take the corner. The center is big, but it's not big enough to compensate for 4 corners and a side, right? If white goes here, like, to continue blocking, then black will just start jumping in. You know, you block, but now black has a lot of points, and white has maybe 30, a little over 30 in the center. It's not quite enough. Hey, TP. So the move that white does play is more forceful because it's a shoulder hit contact-ish area. It's one space away. It's this b6. And we can see, okay, now if black plays up, then when white pushes, this undermines the group, and black is nowhere near as solid as before. Right? Even after this, white will live here. If they're cutting points, you know, white somehow gets out. Right? This isn't a likely sequence, but you know, if white somehow gets out and cuts, then white profits. You know, this can still fall under attack. Even if white just is happy settling and living here, white gains a bigger profit on the bottom left. Black doesn't gain any points here. And this move also has more aji with the c12 stone, right? If you can imagine, in the race to live up here, white gets this move, right? Then white starts getting this attachment, and there's some interesting stuff that can happen. Maybe not there. But there is some interesting stuff, right? This threatens a ko. This threatens a ko underneath. There's a lot of stuff. Or just aji in general. It's hard to talk about it generally without giving a fixed example or specific moves, but that's just generally how the idea behind it. So black blocks. This is pretty much the only move. Yeah, you could push, but white's happy to solidify the corner, and you're still undermined. So black blocks. White's next move is a really good test of to know. It's a sacrifice play. This move here. The idea is that white's going to sacrifice this stone to further build influence in the center. It's a pretty one-way street. Black has to come back to take, and white solidifies the center. So by attacking this really severely, and black is still, black's alive but not quite super alive, still can be harassed quite a bit. White is pretty happy with this. White, with this exchange, the corner is not completely solid, but it is more solid than not having the stone there. White has influence in the center, and we can see this kind of extension that black made is kind of very vulnerable now, right? White has this influence. An invasion here could be very devastating or difficult to deal with, which is actually why black's next move is to solidify this connection. I'm a little surprised. The idea, I suppose, is if black plays here, the corner still has problems. So black wants to help manage the corner while managing this connection, right? If white just goes in, black can cover or shoulder hit. White forces. This is white's privilege because of this sacrifice. And white defends the corner. Black plays here. If black doesn't play here and say, you know, extends here, then any move in the center is sente against this group. So white could defend the center and sente, then defend up here. This is starting to look a little bit bigger than 30 points. Although, it's a much more reasonable way to play. So white caps to emphasize the center again. You can see white's points still aren't particularly solid, but white got a bunch of profit in the bottom left, enough to compensate at least for this upper corner and maybe the bottom together. So now white's center is mostly competing against the upper left corner and maybe these few points here. It's a much closer game. And of course, these old Chinese games don't have Komi. So white is at, but white goes first, so I guess it doesn't matter. So black can't allow white to take the center, so black tries to cut into the center. And of course, white has to aggressively block. This is one of the benefits of having a lot of influence, though. Because because white's position is thick, right? Having attacked, white had gotten thick. You can go for these kind of trades. So white pushes and then blocks, and black wants to still come in, so he pushes. But after these exchanges, black has to come back to defend. Otherwise, since white is strong everywhere, white can still come in and cut. I think it's pretty clear. Like, say black pushes again, white can go for just cutting like this, or pushing once and cutting. It's difficult to manage. So black defends, and white plays this move. It's forcing. Black has to live with this group still, which is why he played the E7 stone. He would rather be forced from below than from the center. This makes life, clearly. It's very painful. White got 2 points in Sente, but it's kind of the consequence of white having so much strength in the center. And then this is a very nice Tesuji. I didn't see this when I was going over it until it was played, but it's a very nice move. We can see that it's difficult for black to respond. If black wants to capture the stone, then this move is forcing. If black blocks, then it's Atari, and black loses a whole bunch of points. So it's difficult to answer. Black does end up he doesn't. Yeah, black descends. This makes it difficult for white to capture the stones. It defends this push or Hane weakness. White still gets to run out though. And white captures the stones, but black has a little better shape. White takes Sente to come to the top. At this point, it's mostly small things. And the game is fairly close, despite white giving a lot of points early. Well, I think white's still actually pretty ahead, but it's fairly close in terms of points. In terms of position, white is pretty good. This is a very big extension. It's on the vital point of these two. It looks like a strange place, but you could think if black blocks here, he's made an empty triangle, which is not efficient. And if black pushes, then white's happy to go further. Or even if white backs off, it's a Sente reduction. Black tries to go a little further, trying to fortify the connection here maybe, putting pressure on white. White defends stylishly, and black comes back to save the stone. If we do a quick count at this point, since white reduced the corner and actually got some points here, black might have 1, 2, 3, like 44 points. And white's points, since these are captured, this is captured, these are captured. White has this corner, white has this, and I'm not counting anything in the center yet, except maybe a little here. This is 8. I'm just going to count it all together, actually. Yeah, so it's about 44 also. But white still has room to develop a little bit, and still has room to reduce black. On the other hand, black can only really reduce the center, and black can't really gain points anywhere. And it's white's turn. So white reduces. This is just a Tesuji. White is planting Aji for stuff in the corner. Right? These moves all make sense, right? They're all forced. So if black doesn't play here and responds, then this cut is very big. White could actually probably extend first. If black takes, then this turn is Sente. It gets dicey, right? After black defends, then white pulls back. Black has to capture this group. White gets to reduce in Sente. So black counterattacks, trying to take the stone, but this descent is very nice. It makes Miai of bridging under or connecting here. Very simple. Black blocks, white fixes the cut, otherwise white dies, and then white plays in the corner. These kind of moves aren't meant to live, but white gets this exchange in Sente to get further solidify the side. White got this move in Sente, and the corner is still kind of iffy, right? If white plays R18, black still only has one eye. It can be close. This is just Sente exchange, or Gote exchange. But because of this exchange, black only has 7 in a row. So if white were to turn at Q2, it would be Sente. And you can imagine, okay, black defends this corner, Here, black has to defend, otherwise he's dead. And then this move becomes a very big reduction. White actually gains even more points in the corner. So that's what white's aiming at. But white gets this exchange, which is, you know, pretty happy for white. White gets to reduce further, but black gets Sente. White defends his points. Black tries to reduce the center and reduce this upper area. White defends. Black takes the corner. And then white blocks. These are all just kind of simple endgame moves. But again, this Hane reduces black to 7 points, or 7 in a row, which is dead if white gets the next move, or alive if black plays the next move, so it makes white's move Sente. These are all Sente endgame exchanges. White defends the center a little bit, but in exchange black takes these points. This is a Sente exchange, otherwise the group dies. At this point, it's mostly endgame. White's lucky, in a sense, to get a stone here. White takes, black takes. White protects up here. If white doesn't, this Hane is very difficult to... You can't save these stones and save the cut, like with the cut. And this exchange still around is kind of dangerous. But this marks the end of the game. If you look at the whole board, black's points got reduced a lot from the beginning. Black originally outlined a lot on the right, but because of the weak group on the bottom, white managed to push into the corner. Black had a 2-space extension here to reduce white, but it got pushed into only 5 points, 2 captures in 1, so, you know, spending so many stones for 5 points is not efficient. All these moves in the center are great for reduction, but they don't build points, right? They only reduce. At this point, black resigned, and it's a pretty clear win for white. If you count at this point, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10. I'd say white has maybe 52, 54, maybe a little under 60 points, maybe 56, 57 points. Black has 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 8, 9. 7, 28. Maybe, yeah, maybe black has a little under 55 points. So the margin is close, but still white can gain a lot of points here that I didn't count. Yeah, seems fairly comfortable at this point because there's no big endgame moves left. And I'm actually curious about this corner. I haven't gone over this game in a long time, but it seems to me that R18 is a big threat, isn't it? After this, I guess white can't get an eye after this push. But it still seems fairly... Actually, no, you can't play here, because white will play here. So here first. It seems iffy. I guess white can't kill black because it takes back and it's eye versus no eye. Okay. I figured it was so, but I wasn't sure. But anyway, the game is pretty handily in white's favor. You know, 5 points... Well, depending on the level you play at, 5 points is a lot or not a lot. If you play, you know, 5 points is maybe for Q games not a lot, but as you get better, 5 points is almost Komi. If you think of it that way, 5 points is basically a whole move behind, which is pretty much a lot. Anyway, so the main points I wanted to go over in this game was how to use your influence, how to use this wall. White never commits to gaining any points anywhere, but he uses his influence effectively to attack the bottom and attack the left, get some reduction at the top, make this squeezing play on the right. If you look at the board, it feels like black has a bunch of clumps, right? This clump at the bottom, this clump on the left, and this clump on the right. And by doing so, white managed to reduce the bottom right by poking in with these stones. You know, gained a fairly big corner, gained some points in the center, reduced the top, this clamp, built a few points here. So the way to effectively use your influence is to attack, and the way to attack effectively is to make sure that you always keep up pressure on your opponent. You want to maximally apply pressure. That's why this attachment and this kick were so effective for white. Okay. That's basically all I wanted to talk about today. I had some other topics I thought about going over, but I didn't really have too much time to prepare. So that's it. Thank you, and I will see you all tomorrow? Yeah, tomorrow probably. Okay, bye.